Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to take you through a couple of recipes for some Deathwing armour schemes. Now, if you've listened to the channel for any length of time, you'll know I'm an enormous fan of the Dark Angels. They were my army back in 2nd edition when I first played the game and collected it, the Angels of Death Codex, all of that. And you'll also know that when we were looking at options for our channel army project, they were a very close second to the Black Templars, which is what we went with in the end. Now, I was a little bit disappointed with the Black Templars test minis that I did, and I actually didn't think they really, not only was the paint not right, I didn't really think they fitted necessarily, not being Assault Terminators in particular. I was a little bit ashamed I didn't get to use those cool new Terminator models. And then Games Workshop sent us through for review the new Deathwing Assault box, and this just felt like too good of an opportunity not to just enjoy painting the, what I think are amazing new Terminator minis in some schemes for the chapter that I love. So I've already done a fair few different Deathwing recipes. Some are on this channel. I've done another one for the upcoming book that Helio's doing. But for this video, I thought I'd go with the very, very old school original sort of bone white armor scheme and that much, much warmer, more yellow scheme that we see more often nowadays. The white scheme in particular is one I've wanted to do for ages. I'm not entirely sure why it changed from this, but very, very early on when we had Deathwing as an expansion for Space Hulk, and then the cover of Dark Millennium, which was sort of the expansion box for 40k, it was this proper white, as you can see. So I thought it was a great opportunity. I love painting lighter colours. I think they look great on the tabletop. I also love how you can weather them up and stuff. But anyway, enough of this. I hope you enjoy the video. Let's paint. Now, just first off, when it comes to actually building the miniatures, so in the box you get a couple of sprues or a couple of sets worth of the new Terminator miniatures, the new multi-part ones, the new Deathwing Knights and Belial. But what I've done here, the miniatures we're looking at it on the left, is actually one of the easy build Terminators that came in the Leviathan box set. I think an amazing set, and really all I've done with this dude is just stuck on loads of different bits and bobs from the little Dark Angels upgrade sprues that are also included in the box. So they've got bits for your Deathwing, bits for your Ravenwing, things like that. One thing that both the kits share, however, is that most of the Power Fist, Chain Fist, the backs of those hands are a separate piece, a separate panel, which makes them very, very easy to remove and either do freehand on or some patterns on or some decals or whatnot, which is what I'm going to do. So I've only blue tacked them, or in the case of the easy build one, I've only just used the little plug to hold it in place whilst I prime, so that I can ping it off later and have some fun with. Now, for the warmer coloured one, I've just want a fairly boring brown base. I've primed both these miniatures using standard grey from Colourforge because it's the only can of spray paint I have at the moment. And then I'm base coating them using this Thondia Brown by Games Workshop. I've thinned this about 1 drop of thinner to 1 drop of paint. I'm spraying at 25 psi, and I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck Signature Series Evolution for this. So that's got a 0.4mm needle and nozzle set in it. You're going to need to adjust those ratios and stuff for your environment and your setup, but that's what I use whenever you see me airbrushing, unless I say otherwise. So base coat of brown for that one, and then for the white scheme, I'm base coating it using Deathcore Drab, which is this lovely grey-green colour. Really, really like this. If I was going to do a great big army of them, I'd probably try and find a rattle can, which I suspect someone like Colourforge will do, that would match these colours pretty close. Now, I've left in tons of the airbrushing for this scheme because it does an awful lot of the heavy lifting. I'm approaching this very much from an army painting viewpoint. I want the armour to really jump out at people, particularly obviously it's Space Marines and in particular Terminators. There's an awful lot of it. It's the centre piece, it's the focus. So getting it right is my main priority. The other elements on it, I'm going to do much, much more simply. And it is a heavily airbrush scheme, this. I enjoy using the airbrush, and Marines in particular, I think, are just fantastic to use it on. Now, for the first highlight, I've done a 50-50 mix of Tamiya paints here. So this is Flat Earth and Flat Flesh. Now, this is both from their acrylic ranges, and I've used Tamiya X20A thinner to thin that mix. So the mix itself is 50-50 of the colours, and then I've thinned that mix probably 3 drops of thinner for every complete drop of the mix, as it were. So I guess it's 3 to 2, 4 to 2, something like that. Anyway, quite a dilute mix is the key here. And that's because I want to be able to build the colour up with the layers of paint being nice and translucent, so I can see through that layer to what's underneath, and that creates all these additional tones by taking advantage of that translucency, which is what the airbrush allows us to do. When it comes to thinking where do I spray, well, anything that's facing upwards is going to be lighter, that sort of classic zenithal approach, but I've also chosen to light the miniature as if there is a strong light coming in from above and to the right as we look at the back, and above and to the right as we look at the front. The two lights don't need to match up because you can't look at the miniature really at the same time front and the back. But very often when you build your miniature, you'll look at the pose and it's pretty obvious where the cool angle is to look at it from. And I then choose which light direction will accentuate that and allow me to have some quite dramatic light into shadow contrast, so a contrast of value. And I think I've sped this up like marginally, but not a huge amount, the footage in here. So hopefully it gives you an idea of roughly how long it's going to take as well. So once I was happy with that, I then go on to the highlight stage, which is just the flat flesh on its own. Now in the bottle, the flat flesh looks very pink, if I'm honest, and I was quite nervous about using it, but I was like, oh, I reckon it'll work. And then once it's in the airbrush and it's going over the other colours, it just had that lovely warmth to it that I wanted, but it certainly wasn't too pink, which was great. And here I'm going into the same areas, but I'm just focusing on a tighter portion of that area, smaller portion of that area. Essentially at the sort of, what would be the word, the apex, would it be? Basically the points that are going to be closest of the curve of the armour panels to where that light is coming from. So as I've said, the front right or top right as we're looking at the front of the miniature here. Now this mixture I have thinned at least 3 drops of thinner to 1. So again, Tamiya X20A thinner with the Tamiya paint. I like to use Tamiya thinner with Tamiya paints because it works, and I like to use whatever airbrush thinner I've got to hand for all my other acrylics. That's just the way I've found that gives me sort of foolproof painting. And here I'm just taking my time, just checking that it all makes sense. So those little knobbly bits on the joints, I realised I'd missed. So I've gone in there and given them a highlight from above as well. For the white scheme, I've gone for a 50-50 mix of Deathcore Drab and Ivory for our first highlight. These are, now Ivory is by Vallejo model colour. These do not, the lighter colours from Vallejo model colour do not airbrush quite as nicely as the lighter colours from Tamiya. But I wanted to mix the colour with the Deathcore Drab, and you can't mix your water-based acrylics with your solvent-based acrylics. They usually turn into sort of porridge. So I needed to find a water-based acrylic that I could mix in. And actually, with the Vallejo airbrush thinner, I didn't really have too much problems, but I probably diluted this mix a little more than the other one. It just means I had to do a few more coats and just be aware that if I got too close to the miniature or applied too much paint in one area in one go, it would spider off everywhere. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. The support you guys give us over there allows myself and Andy to create videos over there and over here each week. I've got some 30k Deathwing ones on there actually from a year or so ago. And without that support, we simply wouldn't be able to do it. We wouldn't be able to plan all the things we've got coming and execute them. So we're hugely appreciative of that. There's only a couple of tiers. We don't really mess about with it all. There's the extra video tier, or there's the give us a cup of coffee to say thanks for the YouTube video tier. But all of it is massively appreciated. And if for any reason you're unable to support us over there, but you still enjoy watching the videos, then give them a like and a subscribe on here. Tell your mates about them, share it. It makes a huge difference to little channels like ours. So thank you for all that. And then for the highlight, we're just going to move on to pure Ivory. So just like with the other scheme, you've got your base colour, your mid-tone is a 50-50 mix of that and the highlight, and then the highlight is the highlight colour. So this is Ivory on its own. You'll notice me putting the model down quite often. I've found with Ivory, I get quite a lot of tip dry, which is where you get a little build-up of paint on the end of the needle on the airbrush. So every so often I'm just wiping that off so I don't get that blowing itself onto the miniature. And you might notice a few little speckly bits on his right-hand shoulder pad there. If you see that happening, generally what's going to be occurring is the paint's going to be too thick for the pressure. So either thin the paint a little bit more or up your pressure slightly. Sometimes it just needs another layer over top and it smooths out. So you can tweak it to get the desired results. And if for any reason you go too broad with your highlights on this, you can always go back to your shadow color, thin it right the way down. So this is probably 4 or 5 drops of thinner to paint here with the Deathcore Drab. I'm just spraying it back into the shadows and some of those transition areas just to smooth things out a little and to bring back any shadow that I've lost. Now I'm going to give the miniatures a quick coat of gloss varnish. So I give the whole miniature like one thin coat and then I focus on the areas that I'm going to apply the decals to. The thin coat is just to help with an oil wash we're going to do later. It's not necessary, but it's helpful. But plenty of gloss on the areas I want to put the decals is very important. I'm using Vallejo polyurethane gloss here. Thin it about 2 drops of thinner to paint. Still spraying 25 psi, all the usual. And it's probably, as I say, 1 coat on the miniature and then 3 to 5 coats probably on the areas where I'm going to do the decals. And I will link up to a video all about applying decals in the corner now. I say I've tried to leave in as much footage as possible in this video just to give you an idea of sort of the workflow and how long things take. Now, whilst the decals are doing their thing, so the decal products that I put on them to help them dissolve in needs a little while to work. I'm just going in and blacking out all the bits that I want black or bits that I might want metal later on. And for this, I'm using Vallejo Model Color Black. It's my favourite acrylic brush black paint. And there they are, all done. Decals have done their thing. Just follow the instructions, say either in that decal video or on the stuff that you buy, the manufacturer's instructions. So once they were dry, obviously I had glossed over the decals again, just the decal area. And now I'm going to apply an oil wash to the miniatures. So for the warmer coloured miniature, I've chosen a shadow brown here. So both of the oils are by Abteilung 502. And I'm thinning them down using normal white spirits from my local DIY shop. If I was doing a squad or an army, I would use odorless artist ones, something like Sandstore from Winsor Newton. But when I'm just doing quick videos, I just use normal mineral spirits. That's because they dry much quicker, they evaporate quicker, which suits me for making videos, but they absolutely stink and they're disgusting. So I don't recommend you using them for big products. And obviously, ventilate and all the rest of it, but you're grown-ups, you know what you're doing with all that. And then we're just going to go in and wash it in. I'm not just smothering it all over the panels, as you can see. For me, that just creates more cleanup work later. I like to use generally quite thin oil washes as well and apply them in multiple layers if I need to, if I'd like to build them up. You can do a thicker wash, slop it all over and clean it off. It will change the look slightly. It's just very much how you prefer to work. And all of our videos really are just about how we paint stuff. And hopefully you can get the odd tip. For the white miniature, I've chosen to use a colour here called Sepia. This is much darker, much colder than the shadow brown. So I've mixed it up with a little bit of mineral spirits, exactly the same. I thought I'd compare them here. I'm not sure how well this comes across on screen. I don't want it to just look like it's 2 pots of the same colour brown. But yeah, it's definitely a darker, colder brown than the other one. And exactly the same process. Now, I like to use an old natural hairbrush when I'm applying it. But when I'm mixing it up and stuff like that, or if I'm doing it in huge quantities, I'll use a synthetic brush because these solvents will eventually just wreck a natural hairbrush. But when I've got one that's no longer any good for normal painting, normally it then goes into the metallic paints pile, and then when it's no good for that, it will go into the oil paints pile. Now, there's no harm applying it over the panels like I've shown you here as one, but it's very easy to clean up as you go along if you do get too much on there. And I certainly like to apply it all over the panels where the decals are. Now, once that's dried, this is about an hour later, maybe a touch longer, I will look around the miniature and think, do I want to reapply this oil anywhere? Is there anywhere where it isn't dark enough for me, or it isn't bringing enough definition into the model for me? And I'll just go in and repeat the process. Now, because it's got paint over it at this point, it's not going to wick around so quickly because that surface tension has increased. It's just something to bear in mind. And depending on the thickness, how I've applied it, all the rest of it, there'll be more or less that I need to do that with. Sometimes I might do that 3 times. Sometimes I do it in one go and it's absolutely fine. So now look around the model and just see if there's anywhere I need to tidy up. So you can see here on his shoulder around the crux terminators, some of the oil has almost separated a little bit and pulled itself out from the gap. So we just need to clean that up a little. There's various reasons for that. It may be that I over-thinned the mix. It may be that I applied it too heavily in one go. But whatever it is, it's very easy to fix. All I do is take a very soft brush. I wet that in mineral spirits and then I dry that off almost completely. So it's just ever so slightly damp. And then I can just tidy that up and help blend that, sort of buff that oil in, move it around a little. The key here is just to be very, very gentle. A nice soft brush. And take your time, really. This is one of my favourite stages of painting, so I never really mind, you know, this sort of clean-up work. It doesn't bother me. And you can also take advantage, if you've got a few areas of it built up, to create a few little streaks here if you want. So you can see I saw there was a sort of blob of it underneath the crux that's on his shin. So I'm just pulling it down vertical top to bottom direction. It's just created some nice subtle streaks on there. It's sort of, well, it is weathering, but I wouldn't consider this my main sort of oil streak stage. That I tend to do at the very end of a paint job if I want to add it. I haven't done that to these models because well, it's an extra step and some people don't enjoy doing it. Once that was dry, I gave the whole model a 50-50 mix of matte and ultra matte varnish by Camo MIG. I'm going to do this later as well, so it may not seem that efficient, but I need to do it at this stage because I want to go in with acrylic paints, and some of the model was still a little glossy, and the acrylic paints won't paint that nicely over that. So it's a very, very quick step to do, but that's why I have done it. Now here I'm going in and just adding a little bit of battle damage, a little bit of edge sort of highlighting, using Zandri Dust in the case of this warmer one, and sponging it on. So if you don't like working with Tamiyas and stuff, you could use Zandri Dust and something else if you wanted. And then just a few key areas, I'll go in and apply it with the brush as well. So I've tried to bear in mind army painting with this, try not to take ages doing it. You know, you could absolutely knock out a squad of these guys in, you know, weeks hobby sessions, 100%. It's very, very simple to replicate all the stages across the miniatures. And for the white model, I've just used the Ivory on its own for that. So I do little chips with the sponge, areas where I think damage is going to occur. And then for the edge highlighting or extra scratches, I just think about focal points. So the face, the power fists, things like that. Little goes a long way with this. What we don't want a model to look like is we've just hit it with a sponge, basically. For the green, it's not an Aquila, is it? Don't know what their chest things are called, actually. No, not sure. I'm going to do that green like we see in most of the artwork. I've used Creed Camo, which is contrast paint, to give me a base coat, a couple of coats of that, and then I'm going to use Loren Forest by Games Workshop to highlight that one up. I've actually gone for gold on the chest plate of the white one because that's what's in the artwork. I think it's pretty cool. And then for the crux, I thought it'd be nice to do a different colour than often that sort of grey stone colour. Went for more of a classic bone colour that we see in some of the art, and I've done that for both of them just because I think it's kind of cool actually. And I base coated it using Rakarth Flesh, and then I've done a couple of coats of Skeleton Horde contrast paint over the top of it. Reminds me of sort of the colours that Wayne England used to do them in when he did the artwork. And then to highlight them, I've just mixed Rakarth and Skeleton Horde together on the palette to give it a little highlight. Nearly there with the miniatures now. Very, very simple eye lens technique here. It's really, really simple to do on a Terminator miniature because of the way the eye lenses are. So we're sort of using quite a thin coat of Mephiston Red here. It's not quite a wash, a bit thicker than that, but we are sort of washing it in. It'll take 2 or 3 coats to give us a solid look, but we want that wash effect because we want it to sort of go into the little recess around the lens and kind of create a bit of a cheap cheap gimmicky glow thing without having to do too much work, really. Then I'm going to use Evil Sunz Scarlett, and it is Evil Sunz Scarlett. It wasn't in the last video, as I mentioned in the description. This is 100% is Evil Sunz Scarlett, and here I'm going to paint the majority of the lens itself, so just really leaving Mephiston in those recesses. And then all I'm going to do is add orange to that Evil Sunz Scarlett and keep painting an increasingly small area towards the centre and the front of the lens. I think I used a Chimera orange paint here, but it just doesn't matter. That was what I pulled out of the bag of orange paints. That's all I needed. Now I give the miniature another coat of that varnish mix so that it's all got the same finish. And I do this before the metals because I want the metals to retain the look of the metallic paint. So final step is the metals. I mean the base obviously, but the final step is the metals for the painting. Here I'm using burnt iron for the silvers. Just flows really easy. Again, it was just the first silver I pulled out, the silver bag, a dark silver. It's like, this will do. It's not worth fretting over. And then for the gold elements, I'm base coating it in the ever wonderful Scale 75 decayed metal, sort of a metallic brown colour. So I've done the chest piece on the old school type one with that. And then I gradually mix in elven gold to that decayed metal and just build that up until pure elven gold on just a few of the edges. Once that paint is completely dry, I've gone in and I've used a sort of black-brown mix of oil paint here, created a wash. Again, just grabbed a brown and a black out of the box, mixed it up, thinned it down, just like we did before with the wash, and I'm just washing it all over the silver and gold here. Once that was dry, if I needed to go back in and give it a little highlight, I do. And there we have them. That's the two schemes. I would be really interested to know which you prefer, that sort of very old school bone white scheme or the newer, warmer stuff that we've seen over the last few years. I love them both. I'll stick in some pictures of some other Deathwing schemes I've done as well. It really highlights for me one of my favourite bits of the hobby is that your interpretation is completely valid. If I saw any of these schemes, I'd be like, oh, that's a Deathwing army, even though they're fairly different colours. And I love that, and I love seeing different people's takes on that type of thing. I do love how that white scheme looks, and I think the red decals look even better on them than the other schemes. Actually, on the subject of decals, I meant to mention earlier, in the box, for whatever reason, the decal sheets that you get, one, they're not the ones that are shown on the outside of the box, but also they don't contain any Deathwing transfers. So you're going to need to pick up the Space Marine ones that come in the various other Space Marine kits that have got some of the Dark Angel stuff on. I thought it was rather an odd decision that to do a Deathwing box and then not give you any Deathwing transfers, but there are of course enough moulded shoulder pads in there for you to do paint the Deathwing symbol red and stuff if you want. But we generally prefer decals and freehand and that sort of thing. But I just thought it was worth pointing out, if you're about to sit down and do the project, you will need to get hold of some decals if you want to use them for it. But yeah, I mean, I've just loved it. It's been a real joy and privilege this week to get to do this video. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thanks for giving me the opportunity on that. So much so that next week's video, I've decided I'm going to take the Bone White scheme and I'm going to do a Space Hulk squad. We're going to take it a few steps further with the painting. We're going to add in a lot of the details that we find in the old artwork. I'll make up some Zone Mortalis type bases as well. Should be really, really fun. Ben and Andy have talked me down from doing an army of it. So I think just a squad on the shelf will make me really happy. And this has no bearing on the Black Templars army project. That's going to be very much ongoing. But really fun to get to do these. So if you've got any questions at all about anything I've done in the videos, pop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks ever so much for your support. Take care. I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.